think of a Tom Waits song in your head and think of the setting for that Tom Waits song. None of them take place during the day. Hello, and welcome to another episode of 1001 Album Complaints. This is the podcast where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys who get thrown out of social situations by being too curmudgeonly get together to talk about albums. Robert Dimery's list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. We are going to give some background on this artist leading up to the album, talk a bit about the recording of it, play some tracks for you, so if you're not familiar with it, don't worry. We're going to give you enough to play along at home. And at the end, we are going to vote and tell you whether or not you really do need to hear this album before we randomly select next week's record. Now, if this is your first time joining us, a word of caution, dear listeners. We are going to make fun of this artist. We're going to make fun of this album. It comes from a place of love. We are all musicians ourselves and great appreciators of the art form, but we can all agree there is a lot to make fun of, perhaps especially for this week's album. Created by a man who once said of himself, "They say I have no hits and I'm difficult to work with, and they say this like it's a bad thing." We are, of course, talking about the album from October 21st, 1975, Nighthawks at the Diner by Tom Waits. Now, if you are not familiar with this album, we're going to play a clip of, I guess I'll call it the opening track. There is an extensive intro. However, this is the first, I guess we're going to call it, real song on this album, Emotional Weather Report.
What we're talking about is late night and early morning low clouds with a chance of fall, chance of showers into the afternoon with variable high cloudiness and gusty winds. Gusty winds at times around the corner of Sunset and Alvarado. Yeah, I know, things are tough all over. When the thunderstorms start increasing over the southeast and south central portions of my apartment, I get upset. And a line of thunderstorms was developing in the early morning hours ahead of a slow-moving cold front. Cold-blooded. With tornado watches issued shortly before noon Sunday for the areas including western region of my mental health.
All right, now that we have level set, I'm going to throw it around the room to our cast of complainers, and they're going to introduce themselves by way of a mean tweet length review, and I'm going to go first to Rob.
Thanks so much, Tom. We always say in the intro that if you don't know the record, we're going to play clips. I think you pretty much already got it at this point based on the clip we just played. You know everything you need to know about this 7-hour-long album. But anyway, here is my tweet-length review. Muppet Louis Armstrong's been hitting the sauce pretty hard. The mics are so good I can actually hear the in-studio audience rolling their eyes.
Wow. Nice. All right, Marty, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I got some gripes with the audience that I'll get to in a minute. But first, here's my mean tweet. If my butthole could sing, it would sound just like Tom Waits.
Wow. Okay.
I do have a second tweet that I deemed too mean for air, but now I'm rethinking that. Do you guys want to hear it anyway?
Let's hear it. I do want to hear it, yes.
My original tweet length review was a direct quote from one of our most common YouTube comments. Too much Tom.
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. All right. And I am Tom. I am going to be taking us down this drunken, meandering journey that is the life and times of Tom Waits. And for my tweet length review, I decided to do it in the style of Tom Waits' writing. And so I'm going to need a little help from the two of you. Marty, I need you to give me an adjective, a 2-word noun, and another adjective.
Jesus, you should have said this ahead of time.
Come on, just whatever, right off the top of your head.
Smelly, 2-word noun. Doghouse.
Doghouse. And then one more adjective.
Wonderful.
And Rob, from you, I need a noun, an adjective, and a verb.
I'll say tooth, ludicrous, swing.
Okay. All right. Tom Waits wrote a smelly album filled with doghouse songs, best enjoyed while sipping on a gin martini in a wonderful bar, looking out the window at the toothed citizens of a ludicrous city swing by in the rain.
Okay.
I think we got pretty close to a Tom Waits lyrics.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Not bad.
Well done, boys.
Print it.
All right. Let's talk about some general impressions. Boys, how was your week?
So let me start this one, and I got to start with something negative. When I first heard this album years ago, the thing that annoyed me was his voice. Upon re-listening to the album, the thing that annoyed me most was the audience. You know when you go to a movie and like the audience laughs at every single stupid fucking joke the entire time, and you're just like, shut up, it's not that funny. Watch the movie and shut the fuck up. That's how this felt to me.
To be clear, you were probably still annoyed by his voice, though, right?
Of course. It was trumped by the audience this time.
Well, I got to say, he also laughs at his own jokes too much. That was sort of the thing that caught my ear on this deeper re-listen. It reads more like a stand-up comedy album and not a great one than it does a musical album.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm coming from a perspective of having a lot of respect for Tom Waits as a songwriter. He has a large catalog of albums. In fact, I believe he has something like 5 albums on the 1001 list, which is pretty nuts.
That's too many.
But he's had a long career. Yeah, I would probably agree. And he is generally, or at least he can be, a great songwriter. Like, I do respect his songwriting craft, but I do not think it's on display here.
That is literally my first note, is there's just not enough songwriting. There's a lot of poetry writing, and a lot of, like you said, the poetry is kind of jokey poetry writing, but my perspective on the album did shift a little bit when I started to think of it as a poetry performance and less of a musical performance. I didn't like it more, but I at least understood what he was going for. The songs that are written, I think, are quite good songs, but half of them are like half-baked song premises that got stretched into the length of a song. Like Emotional Weather Report could maybe be like 3 lines and you got everything you need from it. You don't need a whole 3-minute song from that.
I agree. Its problem is that it's bloated. And I was going to say that I didn't do the research and I haven't heard the story yet, but stripping it down to that focus list made me like the material better because I need it in smaller doses and I need it to be more song focused. Wading through this double disc again and again, I would just zone out. It was kind of a tough week in terms of the listening experience. Now, like a lot of records we've covered, I had listened to this a bunch before, but mostly in the background at a dinner party or while, you know, having a few beers with friends, not really paying direct attention to it. And so it has some vibey, cool ambiance to it. I can't deny that, like a jazz club.
It definitely works in that setting. You know, it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys have ever heard, like Jack Kerouac did this series of poetry readings where he has a jazz band playing in the background, and I'm sure other people did as well. For me, it works a little bit more because the band is kind of improvising over top of him kind of improvising, and I think there's a cool kind of interplay between him and the backing band. The other thing I would say, the concept is kind of interesting of creating a club-like scene. Kind of reminds me like the rehearsal or something. You know, you have studio that you turn into like what feels like a club, and I think it captures that well on the recording.
It does. I get why they wanted to try to get his live feel across, because I think that his first couple of albums didn't land all that well, and the people that were supporting him were like, I've seen you live and you're really captivating live. How do we get that onto an album? And I think that he went in the wrong direction with it, where he was like, what they like is my crowd work. And you're like, no,
yeah,
they
right.
like the songs, man. Like,
I think they just overcorrected for that. I think that's what you're getting. I don't know exactly what the mix of rambling intros is on this record to what one might call real songs, but it's imbalanced. And that is ultimately my problem with it. And you are right, Marty, that the audience response, which it does make sense if you're in an intimate audience and it's a cool place to be. It's a cool invite to get. You're sitting there, I'm sure you're drinking, you're primed to laugh and applaud. But I did have that feeling like Homer Simpson watching Garrison Keillor and banging on the TV and telling it to be more funny because he's just so confused what's going on.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that even if I was sitting in a club, the shtick would wear on me after 73 minutes.
Yeah.
This is like a 40-minute max that I could take that. And then I'm like, all right, well, let's just move on to something. Like, give me some real stuff. And the other thing is that the band is so good and they are so underutilized. Like, they're such a good band. Yeah. And I wanted them to get a little bit more opportunity to step out front.
Yeah, and you put one song on the focus list where I thought the band really gets a chance to shine. It's like there's a musical concept, the song moves, there's a little more interplay, and I really liked that kind of stuff, right? But it was few and far between. And you just made the simplest statement I can make. If I was the producer on this record, I would just cut it down to a single disc.
Yeah.
Just more editing would have helped it a lot. And you strip it back to, there are good things on here. Even in the rambly beat poetry stuff, he does hit on moments of brilliance, I would even say. And then if you paired that in a limited way with the songcraft, which you have to kind of search for on this particular record, you'd have something really, really great. But I think it's just too bloated in the end.
Imagine like this band, never heard Tom Waits before. And he's like, hey guys, I want you to play behind me for this album. And they're like, okay. He's like, start playing something. He's like, shabba-dabba-doo.
And that's probably the case because he wasn't a big star, right?
No, totally. These guys are like, I've worked with fucking Sinatra in the past. Are you kidding me? Like, that's what I got to deal with right now. But the other thing that I found to be where the album fell flat the most is there are some rambly, spoken wordy songs where it still feels connected to what the band is doing. And then there are some where it sounds like it could have been any music going on underneath it. He's not paying any attention to what the band is doing, and he's sort of just rambling. And those felt really flat to me.
It sounds like the job of the band, though, is to follow him in a lot of these sense.
Something tells me you're probably not getting the same take again and again on from him.
Yeah, sure.
Right. There's a sense of it being underdeveloped, and this is going to be a theme. The next record he puts out, Small Change, to me is a much, much better record that does a much better job of balancing these things we're talking about. There's some of that upbeat jazz playing and interplay, but it just feels like the songs are more worked. Yes, there's some jokes, there's some punchlines, but it's mixed, it's balanced much better. And that one, for some reason, is not on the 1001 list. So I just feel extra perturbed by that.
Oh. Agreed. And I feel like the jokes land better when they're not playing to an audience. Like you said, Marty, the audience is annoying and it makes it feel kind of hacky when he's like playing to the audience. A joke without that context on other albums, I find it to be much more enjoyable. I'm like, oh, that's a joke for me. That's not a joke for these assholes that were sitting in a studio in 1975.
Yeah, it's the laugh track concept.
Yeah,
where
totally.
TV went away from it because people feel like it talks down to them and tells them when to laugh. Like, I don't need you to tell me when to laugh, man.
Yeah. If it's funny, I'll laugh. If it's not funny, I'm not laughing. Come on. All right. We are going to jump into the background of one Tom Waits leading up to this album. But first, we're going to take a quick break. And we are back. Now, one thing that makes this endeavor really hard in telling the story of Tom Waits leading up to that is that Tom Waits is full of shit. And I say that with tons of respect for Tom Waits and in the most loving way possible. But you cannot trust a lot of what he says about his own life story. So it was a little difficult wading through some of the Tom Waits exaggerations and bullshit to get to an actual verifiable story. But some things are known about the life of Thomas Allen Waits. Although he claims he was born in the backseat of a yellow cab in the parking lot of Murphy Hospital, there is absolutely no evidence to back that claim up at all. It is true that he was born in Pomona, California on December 7th, 1949.
Wait, quick question. Is the apocryphal lore about his biography, is that coming from like super rambly interviews, or are you plucking that from his song lyrics?
That's coming from super rambly interviews. Oh,
Okay,
yes.
just checking.
Yeah. So Tom was the middle child and only son of a homemaker and an alcoholic school teacher. He grew up in Whittier, California, and by all accounts, he had a pretty normal childhood, although he was bullied in grade school. And I mean, yeah, like a lot of people get bullied in grade school, but I assume that if it's enough to make it to your Wikipedia page, it's probably a little extra level of bullying. And I also got to imagine that he was a weird fucking kid.
Yeah, is that when he got punched in the throat and developed his signature voice?
No, we'll get to the signature voice a little later. But from an early age, he does take to music and also decides that he wants to be a musician quite young. Before he is 10 years old, he's learned how to play the bugle, which probably didn't help with the bullying in school.
Yeah.
I somehow picked the most annoying instrument.
He also plays the guitar.
Next up, the bagpipes.
Yeah, he also learns how to play the guitar, and his dad teaches him how to play the ukulele. But when he's 10 years old, his parents divorce, his dad moves out, and coupled with his mom's decision to move to Chula Vista, which is about 2 hours south and around San Diego as opposed to being around LA, these things had like a big impact on a young Tom Waits. He said that he felt like he had to become the man of the family, and by the time he was 14, he was already working to help support his mom and his sisters.
Shout out Chula Vista. It's like the last town before Mexico in California, pretty much. And they have banging tacos there.
Well, he also said that like his dad would come down from LA to visit them and then take them to Tijuana to hang out, which,
Yeah.
I mean, at
Right.
like 12 years old, you probably shouldn't be taking your kid to hang out in Tijuana. I don't know what it was like in the 50s, but I certainly wouldn't do that now. Now, this is where the story gets a little interesting because during his time visiting relatives in Northern California, it was like his mom's relatives, he becomes enamored with the gravelly voice of an uncle and decides that he wants to emulate that for his singing voice. And I tried to find this interview, but I had watched an interview with him a long time ago where he claimed that he would stick his face in his pillow at nighttime and growl and scream as loud as he could to roughen up his voice, and that it actually did permanent damage to his vocal cords. And that's one of the reasons why his voice sounds like that. I don't know if it's true or not. It could just be more Tom Waits bullshit, but that is what he claimed in an interview that I can no longer find, that it was a very purposeful roughening up of his voice.
I'm sure he did a few other things to roughen up that voice, too.
Yeah, I'm sure like cigs and booze.
Cigs and whiskey are,
Yeah.
they're not going to help. As a teenager, he fronts a band called The Systems, which was an R&B outfit, and he loved like Ray Charles, but he also loved Bob Dylan. And he would apparently scrawl Dylan lyrics on his bedroom walls as a child. And maybe he was just happy that somebody with a shitty singing voice could make it as a musician. I don't know.
All right, the template is here.
As he gets into his later teens, he is pretty regularly sneaking out to go see live music, and officially decides then that that's what he wants to be. He wants to be a musician. Now, this is the mid-'60s. So it's right around the time that the beatniks are going out of fashion and the hippies are becoming the dominant counterculture. But Waits is not interested in being a hippie, and he identifies much more with the poetic bend of the beatniks. So he loved Kerouac, Ginsberg, William Burroughs. And I think importantly for this album, he also said that he loved the comedy stylings of Lenny Bruce. So I think from a young age, he fancied himself a comedian. And what is it with fucking shitty musicians thinking that they can be funny and trying to be comedians? Who would have the audacity to fucking do that?
Such assholes.
He does some odd jobs in his late teens, and this is where he develops a love of observing people and writing snippets of their conversations. He's often like inventing backstories for these people, kind of creating characters out of these overheard conversations that he had when he was working at a pizza shop. He then also, for some reason, becomes a fireman for the U.S. Forestry Service for 3 years. And in California, that is a tough fucking job. These are the guys that are fighting wildfires. And that's no joke of a job. He does that for 3 years. And he also enlists in the Coast Guard for a few years. I don't have any confirmation about his motivations around there, but this was like the mid to late 60s. And this is right around the time that people are getting drafted for the Vietnam War. And both of those jobs would exempt you from the draft. So if you're a fireman or if you're in the Coast Guard, you would not be drafted and sent to Vietnam.
Better than like shitting yourself in the like recruiter's office, you know?
Yeah, Ted Nugent style. Yeah, he's like, I got 14-year-olds to bang.
Keep in mind, he already played bugle. I mean, he was built for the military.
Seriously. Playing reveille. So to further support this hypothesis that he was trying to escape the draft, as soon as he gets out of the Coast Guard, he promptly enrolls in a community college to study photography, which also exempts you from the draft if you're in college. He's also studying the piano during this time, trying to become more musically proficient overall, and he's going to see a lot of folk shows in San Diego.
Why the fuck would being a photographer get you out of the draft?
Just being in college.
Oh, just being in college. Okay. Oh, I thought it was something about actually being a photographer. I'm like, nope. I think you want the most amount of photographers to put on the front lines. You know.
I don't know if they wanted to document all the shit they were doing in Vietnam.
Right. I guess, yeah.
But yeah, that was actually a really big bone of contention with the draft back in the day, is that they said that the kids whose parents could afford to pay for college for them were getting out of the draft. And it was basically only the poor kids that were getting drafted and sent to Vietnam. So,
And college was only like a nickel back then.
yeah, especially in community college. Like if you're going to like Chula Vista Community, I can't imagine they're looking at your transcripts like, oh, you only have a 3.9. I don't think we can get in.
Right. Tijuana U paid you to go there.
Again, during this time, he is trying to become more musically proficient. He's studying the piano, going to all these folk shows, and he gets an in with a local venue that allows him to perform. He basically is a doorman, and they let him play sometimes. He's mostly doing folk covers, including a song that appears on this album, Phantom 309. That was one of the first songs that he ever learned and performed live. He starts to incorporate some more original material into his sets. He's sharpening his skills as a songwriter. And again, we talked about it before, but my biggest gripe about this album is he's a great songwriter.
He is.
I think he's written some fantastic songs.
He has.
They're just not in evidence on this album.
They're not here.
No, not at all. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking. Whatever.
I think he's got some good lyrics. You know, I think that's probably I'd say half his strength is his lyric writing.
Sure. I would say half his strength is his lyric writing. He writes very evocative lyrics. And I think that when you learn that he was enamored with beat poetry, you're like, oh, that makes kind of a lot of sense. They were always trying to make these random connections and throw words in there that didn't, like when I was doing that Mad Lib for the Tweet Length review, it's like I took an adjective and I was like, well, I'm just going to replace that with a noun. Because he's all about, oh, she had that Maybelline Cadillac. And you're like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But okay, yeah, I get it. You throw a well-known noun in front of it and all of a sudden it gives it some extra meaning.
And that is a tried and true songwriting technique that I've heard of other people using. I've heard of David Bowie using a technique that they call cut-ups, which maybe Tom Waits dabbled in, where you literally just write a bunch of phrases on a piece of paper and then you cut it up and rearrange it, almost like a precursor to magnetic poetry or something. But they're your words, but you get new connections that weren't obvious to you.
Yeah, well, and it also probably destroys any original meaning. But I actually think that for a lot of songwriters, that is probably a plus. And like, I want to get away from whatever I was trying to freight because, it didn't really mean that much to me. I'm writing a song about a guy that I overheard half a conversation from in a pizza parlor. I made up a backstory for him. So if it doesn't matter if the meaning goes away,
I would comment that maybe I'm not a songwriting historian or anything, but it seems like there's two different ways to get to universality in songwriting. One is to go hyper specific, which weirdly has the effect of being more universal, right?
Yeah, like Dylan does that a lot with like real specific parts of history with specific characters and just tell a real tight story about it.
Right. And the other way is what we're talking about here, which is to effectively combine concepts willy-nilly to create images, which then the listener can interpret and they make meaning out of it. And it seems to be more rich with meaning because you have to make it or something.
Like Pink Floyd.
I think Bob Dylan does that too, honestly, but yeah.
Yeah, sure.
David Byrne also does that a lot, where it's just, I'm just throwing out a bunch of impressions and you're right, Rob, because you feel like you ferreted out the meaning. Then you're like, oh, that must be the meaning. That's really important to me now. And he's like, I didn't mean any of that shit, but okay. Right. I'm glad that you got that. All right. So Tom Waits starting to make a name for himself on the San Diego folk scene. But right up the road was the place that was really happening, Los Angeles. And he quickly decides that if he is really going to make it as a songwriter, he needs to get a foot in the door at some LA clubs. So he starts to regularly travel up to perform at the Troubadour, which has come up before on the show. It's a super hip club that helped launch the careers of the likes of Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, Carole King, Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Browne, to name just a very few of the people who got their start at the Troubadour.
Just to name a few people that all dated each other.
I feel like you specifically talked about that club on the Elton John episode, that he had some kind of run there.
Yeah, because it was interesting in that context, because everybody sort of expected that if you were going to come, you're going to play at the Whiskey, because he was a little bit more rock and roll. But basically his promoter was like, you're not rock and roll enough for the Whiskey. If you go there, you're not going to seem edgy enough. But if you go to the Troubadour, you're way more rock and roll than anything that's going on in the Troubadour. So you're going to blow them away.
Nice.
Yeah, smart move. While he's performing at the Troubadour, he ends up catching the eye of a guy named Herb Cohen, who basically gives him a publishing contract. So Herb Cohen is not associated with like a record label, but he's like, work with me, I'll get you a record contract. And like, we have like a publishing deal together. And so he ends up recording a bunch of songs with Herb Cohen, kind of on spec, not for a record label, and end up going nowhere. Nobody wants to release the album. Nobody thinks it's good enough. In fact, they're not released in any form until like the early 90s. They basically just sit on these early demos thinking that they're kind of garbage. So we're going to level set. It is 1972. A 23-year-old Tom Waits has quit his job. He was working at that pizza parlor, but when he got that publishing deal, he quit his job and he moved to LA to be a professional songwriter and musician. He snagged some great gigs at the hottest folk venue in town, but when he was given his shot to win a record contract, he failed to capitalize, and Herb Cohen couldn't find anybody to release the recordings that they made. So he still goes back to the Troubadour. He's still plugging away. And luckily for him, he catches the eye of David Geffen, who offers him a contract with Asylum Records, based not on the strength of the recordings that he had made with Herb Cohen, but on the strength of his live performance. He gets offered a contract with Asylum Records through David Geffen. And Asylum Records, I learned this week, was formed exclusively because David Geffen could not find anybody to give Jackson Browne a record contract. So he said, I'll make my own fucking label and we'll release it. So they called it Asylum Records because he was essentially picking up a bunch of other artists that no other record label wanted and would start releasing shit for them.
And this has to be relatively early in the David Geffen story. He obviously went on to oodles more success after this.
Yes, to become like a billionaire, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty early. He was in his, I think, like late 20s at the time. So he wasn't like a big money guy or anything like that. So Waits is now officially signed with Asylum Records. And he's focusing on his songwriting. And what he's really focusing on, what he has fallen in love with, is the late night culture of Los Angeles. And specifically not the cool happening clubs and bars, but like the diners and the shit dive bars that are attracting the down and out of the city. That becomes his main muse and becomes the main subject matter for his songs. I heard someone say that his early albums are him trying to make sense of Los Angeles, and that Los Angeles is essentially like the most important character in all of his songs. That's like sort of the through line to all of his songs. It's just like the shit side of Los Angeles.
It's an interesting take because that's not the obvious side of Los Angeles, I suppose.
Yeah, you'd think that you'd want the I love LA, girls, girls, girls style. So I just thought that was really interesting because I do think that you could describe Tom Waits' writing style as noir, right? It has a little bit of that noir mysteriousness and way of turning a phrase, but every single Tom Waits song, think of a Tom Waits song in your head and think of the setting for that Tom Waits song. none of them take place during the day. There's not a single Tom Waits song that you're like, oh, that's a sunny afternoon
good point.
that you were hanging out in the park. You
That's
know?
a good point. He doesn't do sunny.
No, he does not do sunny. It's all like rainy, shitty nights. So a lot of critics will say that Tom Waits is playing a character, and he has not really earned this sort of down and out, hopeless drunk with a silver tongue persona that he puts forward in his work.
You mean he's not drunk?
Well, listen, I can see the viewpoint that a critic would say that, like, this seems like a put on. I happen to think, especially early Tom Waits work, not that it's a put on, but that, like, he decided to become a down and out drunk. Like, a lot of people are like, they don't choose to become the down and out drifter hobo. But he's like, no, that's what I want to be. I want to be a hobo with a drinking problem.
He says the same thing in like every interview. That's like, I have a glass of sherry before I go to bed. Or he quotes Charles Bukowski, where he's like, they think I'm down at 5th and Broad at the whatever having a drink when I'm actually at the gym, you know?
Well, so he very specifically has cultivated a persona. And interestingly, as he got more famous, he started to use that persona as a way to protect his privacy. He's apparently a very, very private person and has intentionally made it so that it's very hard to find real information about his actual personal life. Like, I know he lives in Sonoma, California, and he's got 3 kids, but not a lot beyond that is like verifiable because he's very covetous of his privacy.
Didn't you run into him at a bar and ask him if you wanted to like go smoke a cig? Were you going to talk about that?
Great segue. That's going to bring us to Tom Waits by the numbers.
Woo!
Here we go. Woo!
All right.
751. That is the first number we're going to throw out. As in, there are 751 seconds of intro on this 4,434 second album. That means that the album is 17% intro, and that is too long.
Yeah.
You could have cut one disc from this album.
Yeah.
Just
There's some outros too you're not even counting that are like tacked onto the end of tracks.
Yeah, I'm not even counting the outros, just the intros. Yeah.
Jesus.
As Rob said, very, very bloated. The next number that we're going to talk about is 2011. As in, Tom Waits was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2011, despite never having an album that cracked the top 10 or any hit singles, at least that he recorded himself. He is definitely one of those artists who, if you look at his sales, they do not justify his impact.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, and we didn't cover this in general impressions, but you're right. He's been an omnipresent recording artist without hits, but everyone knows who he is. And even if you don't like him or haven't really listened to his music, you probably have kind of an idea of what he sounds like, and you're probably pretty right. It's impressive.
Yeah. He's somehow managed to get his way into the zeitgeist. We actually talked about this on the Little Richard episode a while back. And one of the ways that Little Richard stayed in the public consciousness is by going on late night talk shows and just being a fucking maniac. And I think Tom Waits did a lot of that. He would go on these late night talk shows and either really be or pretend to be stumbling drunk, chain smoking, and saying these bizarre off the wall things.
True, but I mean, let's give Tom some credit. He has continued to make music this entire time, right?
He has. Unlike Little Richard, he has continued to make music.
Right, and I mean, some of it is acclaimed, right? He's got this run of albums in the 80s that are on the list, I think, that bleed into the 90s, but even some of his stuff from the last 20 years, you know, is critically acclaimed, at least. I'm not uber familiar with it.
And also, he's been involved with LA scenesters the whole time too, like Jim Jarmusch and John Lurie and a lot of those kind of. He's like an artist.
Yeah, and he's done a decent amount of acting.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that Coen Brothers? It was a bunch of vignettes about a Buster Scruggs.
On Netflix.
Yeah, he was fantastic in that, and it was just him. There was no other character in that scene. It was just him.
He's good. No, I remember him as Renfield from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Keanu Reeves one.
Yeah.
In the 90s. But were you going to incorporate his hit songs by other artists at some point in this story time?
Yeah, well, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but yes. Yeah. The next number that we're going to talk about is 45, as in Tom Waits has been married to Kathleen Brennan for 45 years.
Better off without a wife. I don't think so, baby.
Yeah.
Seriously. Well, she was apparently responsible for daring him to produce his own stuff. And so the first album that he produced on his own was Swordfish Trombones, which I believe is also on the list. And then that led into Rain Dogs. And so when he got into his most experimental, but I think most critically acclaimed period, he was doing that because he was being pushed by his wife. And to be a musician, especially like a touring musician, and to be married for 45 years, that's impressive. I was a little blown away by that. It seemed like, especially with the claims of, being a drunken alcoholic rambler, that he'd be stepping out a whole lot more.
Wait, how many women do you think are at these shows, Tom?
Oh, I'm sure it's at least 80-20 female to male, right?
There's a certain kind of hipster who wears an engineer's cap and smokes a pipe who's really into Tom Waits.
I don't know, man. I went to a Nick Cave concert thinking that it might be similar to a Tom Waits concert as we're describing, and it was lots of women that were dressed like they wanted to be seen by Nick Cave.
Wow.
Interesting. Nick Cave has a reputation as a coxman or something like that. Is he?
I don't know. I guess so.
He's got a deep voice and a full head of hair, so that's a good start.
Yeah, fair point. Right. All right. And then the last number that we're going to touch on is 1. As in, Tom Waits is the one and only celebrity that I have ever met. And yes, he was super fucking cool. Saw him at a small show where he was there to support his friend's kids' band. And Rob and I were there to support a band from Delaware that we knew that was on tour.
Spinto Band. Thomas Hughes from Spinto Band was on the show a couple months ago on the ABBA episode. And we were seeing him and his band, yeah.
Yes, yeah. We were seeing them, and I don't remember anything from the Spinto Band show because I think I was just completely enamored with the fact that I got to talk to Tom Waits for like 5 minutes, and he was really cool. And I asked him if he wanted to smoke with me, Marty. Yes. And he said he quit smoking. And I asked him how he did that. And he said he quit drinking. And I was like, I'm not interested in doing either of those things. So,
here we are 15 years later.
Yes. I mean, yeah, at least 15 at this point. All right. Let's get back into our story. When we last left Tom Waits, he was working on his songwriting style and trying to put together some songs to make an album for his new Asylum record contract. He says that his writing process at this time is to go into a really shitty dive bar and strike up a conversation with anyone that he thinks looks interesting. That's usually some drunken wreck of a human. And he will buy them beers and then start asking them questions and get them to relate their life story. And he uses that as fodder for these sort of character study vignettes that comprise a lot of his early songs. Apparently he's quite a good interviewer, and people will just say things that they're like, I've never said this to anybody before, but blah, blah, blah. Now, maybe the fact that he's like going in and buying the beers is loosening them up a little bit, but I thought that that was an interesting approach. It's almost like he's like, I know I'm not an interesting enough person to have had all of these experiences to write songs about. We talked about this again on the Pogues episode just a little bit ago, episode 222, fantastic episode. But Shane McGowan, the songwriter for the Pogues, was like the guy out there living on the streets, getting his teeth bashed in, having these experiences. I think Tom Waits was like, I know I'm not that guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to the people that are those guys, and I'm going to get their stories, and then I'm going to incorporate them into songs. Whether or not that's inauthentic, I don't know. I think it's effective, certainly. So we're going to level set again. It's 1972. David Geffen has signed Waits to Asylum Records. And in March 1973, he releases his debut album, Closing Time. Now, Closing Time is well reviewed. Tom Waits is described as a boozier Randy Newman, which I think absolutely nails it. So, Marty, you were very prescient with your comment there. But it doesn't get a lot of press. So the people that listen to it like it, but not a lot of people listen to it. Closing Time eventually goes gold in the UK, but it took quite a while, and fails to chart in the US or the UK. So it's kind of a modest success. but it's certainly nothing that is setting the course for somebody having 5 albums on a list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. So although the album doesn't sell that well, he is a songwriter's songwriter. And when the Eagles put a version of Old 55 on their album On the Border, and that album goes on to sell 2 million copies in the US alone, mind you, that nets Tom Waits not only a decent amount of money, but also kind of recognition from other people that he is like a good songwriter. You know, he had this very underselling debut album, but the Eagles liked a song on there enough to put it on an album that sold 2 million copies. It's probably the top 100 selling albums of all time. And so it gets him a little bit of money, gets him a little bit of recognition.
It's a great tune, too.
It is a great tune. And frankly, that is kind of a trend in his career. I would be willing to wager that Tom Waits has made more money off of Rod Stewart's Downtown Train than he has made off of the rest of his catalog combined. I think that's probably a fair statement.
I buy it.
I didn't know he wrote that. Wow.
Oh, yeah, dude.
It's impressive. Yeah.
First of all, his versions, I actually quite like his version as well. And it's on my favorite album of his, Rain Dogs, which we will get to at some point, I am sure. So he embarks on a tour to promote his debut album, Closing Time. But he's the opening act for other bigger names, and he's not a good fit for the audiences. I think the audiences for Tom Waits shows need to kind of really sign on to the Tom Waits shtick that they're going to get.
Is he the opener for Jethro Tull or Ram Jam or something?
He's coming out like, hey, everybody, how's it going? I'm going to sing a little song about a little down and out drunkard. Fucking play Freebird, motherfucker. So he comes back to LA in mid-1973, and he's feeling pretty low. But he's convinced to go back on the road, opening for the Mothers of Invention after their original opener pulled out because the crowds were so hostile to them.
Jeez.
But I think Tom Waits thinks they're pretty weird, a little jazzy. I'm pretty weird, a little jazzy. I think this is actually a pretty good fit. And yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Apparently he gets routinely pelted with fruit while performing.
Fruit?
Yes,
Like,
apparently people were bringing fruit specifically to throw.
oh, Jesus.
What kind of fucking psychopath does that? So, like, yeah, those people didn't want the opener to be good. They wanted the opener to suck, and they wanted to throw shit at them. Like, they were prepared to hate the opener.
What a time. Do you think you could sneak in a bag of tomatoes into a show today?
You might be able to be like, this is an apple that I brought to snack on later.
I'm a diabetic. I need my fruit.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is that it sounds like Frank Zappa was kind of an unapproachable dick the entire time.
No.
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah, so it fits with literally everything I've heard about Frank Zappa.
He's also not a
Fucking
fan
asshole.
of drinking.
Yeah, or having fun, apparently.
Or keeping things loose in any regard.
All right, so that experience, it does nothing to improve Tom's outlook on his career. So when he gets back to LA, he's writing songs for his second album, and he's like, I really don't know what I want to do. David Geffen decides that he wants to go in a jazzier direction with the production. So they enlist this guy, Bones Howe.
Great name.
Yeah, it's a great name. I'm sure he wasn't christened Bones. Like his parents really.
Jazz guys have the best fucking names.
He and Waits click instantly. They collaborate to record The Heart of Saturday Night, which is released in October 1974, Waits' second album. And partly owing to the Eagles using one of his songs from his debut on the Border, this one gets much more widely reviewed. So that's all he really wanted. He put out Closing Time. Not a lot of people listen to it. He puts out The Heart of Saturday Night, and a bunch of people review it, and they don't really like it. So he finally gets a wider audience, and the reviews are not very favorable. Tom Waits himself has said that the album was an unrealized vision. The quote is, very ill-formed, but I was trying.
It's not as good. I mean, I'll just say as a fan, yeah, I like Closing Time pretty good.
It's not as good, no.
And yeah, some of the other records, again, I haven't listened to every single thing he's done, but I have listened to that one, and I just think it's not as good.
So he's got this album. He's not super happy with the album, but he's got to go back out on the road to support it. And Herb Cohen comes to him and says, Tom, your album isn't well received as your debut, but I think it's got promise. You need to go and get the word out. I have the perfect band for you to tour with. the mothers of invention. And he's like, are you fucking kidding me? I just got produce pelted at me on the last tour. The crowd hated me, but Cohen convinces Waits to go back out on tour with the mothers of invention.
Why? Jesus. Glutton for punishment.
It might have helped that Herb Cohen also managed Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
Oh, it's like double dip.
Yep, he was double dipping.
Yeah, I get the through line if you're at the record executive level. You're like, these are both uncategorizable weirdo bands, but they're so distant sound-wise.
They are. So, but Tom Waits is like, I can fucking do it, man. I can win these crowds over. He goes out on the road, he gives it his all, and the crowds fucking hate him, and they pelt him with shit, and Frank Zappa's a gigantic asshole the entire time. It's a fucking train wreck of a tour. But Cohen was right about one thing, in that other people in the industry started being like, yo, you did 2 tours with Zappa? You're a fucking workhorse, man. Like, nobody does that shit. So it got him a lot of respect from other people in the industry. And that helps to kind of buoy his spirits. Another thing that I think probably helped to buoy his spirits is that he starts fucking Bette Midler.
Oh,
yeah. Miss Wind Beneath My Wings herself. They meet in New York while Waits is touring. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the next Bette Midler album that she released after her affair with Tom Waits is called Songs for the New Depression. I think that there's probably some through line there.
Okay.
Damn, dude.
You know, that puts a little spring in his step. He's feeling a little better about his career at this point, and he feels like he can maybe make this happen. He got himself out of the draft for Nam, but he did 2 tours opening for Zappa, so he's pretty confident he can handle anything that is thrown at him. And at this point, Herb Cohen comes back to him and he's like, I have diagnosed the issue. I've seen you perform live, and the raggedy charm that you exude as a live performer, it's a hallmark of your performances. We have not been able to get that to translate over to any of your albums. So why don't we just fucking do it live? He talks to Bones Howe, and Bones Howe is like, hey man, we should just create a nightclub at the Record Plant in LA. Now, the Record Plant has come up before, a storied studio where the likes of Born to Run, Hotel California, and Rumors, to name a very few of the albums that were recorded there. It is one of the biggest hitmakers of all time. Yeah.
3 of the low-selling albums of all time.
So the idea was that they're going to transform the recording room into a full-on jazz clubs, patrons, tables, drinking, the whole shebang. And Bones comes up with this idea because he happens to know that Barbra Streisand fit an entire orchestra into that recording room a few years back, and that they had made all of the recording stuff modular and movable. So you could clear out a huge space in the room for a orchestra if you needed. He's like, well, how about instead of an orchestra, we just get a bunch of Tom Waits fucking drunk ass friends and throw them in there. Now, Bones goes out and recruits a killer band for this session, and they do not get a chance to shine, but they're anchored by Michael Melvoin on piano and arrangements, Jim Hugert on bass, Bill Goodwin on drums, and Pete Chrislieb on sax. Now, these guys are not household names, but they are very well respected jazz performers. Pete Chrislieb plays for a long time with Count Basie. Michael Melvoin was on a bunch of Sinatra recordings, and get this, played piano on the fucking Mission Impossible theme.
Oh, damn.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's quite the fucking byline right there.
That's awesome.
It's no Miami Vice theme, though. Shout out Jan Hammer.
How dare you? Dude, no, hold on. Shout out Layla Schifrin, baby. Layla Schifrin can beat up Jan Hammer any day.
Yeah. Jim Hugert was on the Sinatra album, Old Blue Eyes Is Back. These guys are just fucking assassins, basically.
Wait, are you going to get to what that piano player does and doesn't do? Like, why does he need to arrange things for Tom Waits if he's a piano player?
I think that what it really came down to is that for some of the songs, Tom Waits just came in with poetry. And he was just like, we're just going to put some shit behind it. And those are the ones that sound really unfocused and divorced from the lyrics, or the singing is divorced from the music.
I see. But Tom Waits is playing piano on a lot of this material, right?
On some of the material he is. On some of the material he's not. When it gets real rambly, that's not him on a piano.
Yeah.
But yeah, When he's singing with the piano, that's Tom Waits.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Because I singled out one particular song we're going to talk about where I was like, is this Tom soloing? Like, I know he's good, but this feels like too much.
No, it's definitely Michael Melvoin, who is again, just a absolute top tier piano player. So they set up this faux club. They invite people to come and be in the live audience for the recording, and they do 4 sessions over 2 days on July 30th and July 31st of 1975. The crowd interaction becomes a huge part of the album, for better or worse. It helps the live feel, and one thing that it does is it differentiates it from any other album that was getting put out at the time. There wasn't really anything else that sounded like this, and so it did have this weirdly fresh feel to it, even though the style of music and the style of delivery was kind of harkening back a little bit more to the beats in the 50s. It did still sound pretty fresh in the 70s.
I feel like I've been a little harsh on it up until now, but I do have to give the idea credit. It's a cool idea. It does sound interesting. I didn't know until this week that it was not just a live record in a jazz club.
Same here. I was like, oh, cool, the live album. I didn't know that, but yeah.
Yeah.
But Tom, did he literally know a lot of the people in the audience? Because sometimes you can hear people just like talking and stuff, and it's like,
Marty, I don't know what the guest list looked like, but I know that it wasn't like people just showed up.
It wasn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
I did notice what Marty's talking about. They're not being overly respectful.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe they were like Hollywood hotshots that they got invited, like some scenesters that are like not impressed at all by being.
Or maybe they prepped him with that because, to be honest, that's kind of what a jazz club is like.
Yeah,
it's noisy even while the band's playing, and people do talk over the band. It is kind of part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this hip feel and this kind of different vibe, because this is very much a vibe album, it gets it pretty well reviewed, and the sales follow. Now, it's not a platinum album. It's not even a gold album. It goes silver in the UK.
Okay. And
it peaks at number 163 on the US chart.
Is like Denim a ranking? That's like the first one.
I always like to say our albums go cardboard.
Yeah, there we go.
Of course, it's a huge amount of success compared to us, but for someone who's backed by David Geffen 3 albums in, it is a surprisingly low turnout.
It is. And yeah, peaking at 163 on the US charts is not, I'm sure, what Tom Waits was hoping for or David Geffen was hoping for, but it also was a step change in terms of sales and reception from his previous 2 albums. And it does help springboard him into a different echelon of songwriter and performer. And his career goes on to be one of those who has an influence vastly outweighed by record sales. But seeing as there are 4 more Tom Waits albums on the list, we are going to stop the story there, and we're going to dig into some of these tracks. What do you say, gentlemen? Shall we do it?
Let's do it, baby.
Let's do it.
All right. We are going to jump back into, I swear to God, a different part of Emotional Weather Report.
With a 1034 millibar high pressure zone and a weak pressure ridge extending from my eyes down to my cheeks. 'Cause since you left me, baby, put the vice grips on my mental health. Well, the extended outlook for an indefinite period of time till you come back to me, baby, is high tonight, low tomorrow. Precipitation is expected.
What the fuck, man? It's not a song.
I thought you might get to this, but since you didn't, I looked up the Chris Gow review, and part of it was he said, Waits is so full of shit that Portisand, the porta potty company, ought to name a model after him.
Oh, damn.
Wow. That's fucking fantastic.
Which that's about as crude and base as Robert Christgau gets.
Yeah. But this is like, it's a 3-minute and 47-second song that has a 2-minute and 58-second intro to it, and it is a 15-second idea.
Yeah, it has a punchline. It's like someone telling a super rambly joke and not getting to the point, doing it wrong and taking a bunch of twists and turns. Yeah. And I'm like, I get it. You're comparing your emotions to the weather.
Yeah.
And then there is the punchline about precipitation expected, but blink and you'll miss it because I'm so lulled into sleep by... This is my low point, actually. I'm calling this a low point. I think this is the problem with the album. I sort of can't believe that this is the opening track, or the intro to this is the opening track.
I think the intention of it probably is supposed to be it's humorous, I guess. But it is a pretty like base, low-hanging fruit type of comparison to make a whole song about and open an album with.
Yeah. You know, to go into the sort of comedy world, there were guys like Norm Macdonald that could tell an unfunny joke with an obvious punchline for 6 minutes and it'd be hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like 1 in a billion people who can pull that off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom Waits is not one of them.
I agree. It should just be shorter. We already said it, but there's an entire intro. There's the song, if we're calling it a song, is a rambly intro of a song. And then there's a rambly outro tagged onto the end after the punchline.
Mm-hmm.
Like even Led Zeppelin thinks that's too much rambling.
Yeah.
And there's not really that much for the band to do. Like they're just a tight jazz band holding it down, but you can tell these guys are like, I do this shit in my sleep. They are not stretching at all. And again, that's the thing that annoyed me the most. I'm like, I didn't know going into this week how amazing these guys were. And then I was like, these guys are fucking murderers. They're so good at their instruments, and you have them do stuff that like the three of us could do. What the fuck, man? All right. Let's go on to the next song on our focus list, and I am gonna say a song. It's an actual song. This is Better Off Without a Wife.
All my friends are married, every Tom and Dick and Harry. You must be strong if you're to go it alone. Here's to the bachelors and the Bowery balls. Those who feel that they're the ones that are better off without a wife. It's how like I sleep into the crack of noon, midnight howling at the moon, going out when I want to, and I'm coming home when I please. Don't have to ask permission, I wanna go out fishing, never have to ask for the keys.
All my favorite Tom Waits songs are ballads. And this is one I like because it's a ballad. And also I just, something about the lyrics and sentiment of the song reminded me of the 38 long years of bachelorhood.
Yeah.
First of all, Marty, I think the line, all my favorite Tom Waits songs are ballads, is a great song title in and of itself.
Yeah, there we go.
For a Tom Waits style ballad. But so consider that for your next album.
Yeah, sure. My first album. And
But yeah, I like this. I think this is probably the closest thing to a single. Mm-hmm. Maybe Warm Beer and Cold Women, which is not on our focus list, would also qualify. It sounds like an actual song. It's about something. Unlike most of the other stuff here, it sounds like he wrote something before he sat down at the piano.
Yes. This is where I really got the drunk Randy Newman vibes. Like this has a very Randy Newman feel to me. But I also kind of was like, oh, he's a bit more of a delivery man than I thought he was. You know, you think of like the buttery voices of like a Dean Martin when you think of delivery man, but
Sure.
he kind of has the same style, just with a completely wrecked voice. But like he's playing around the beat with that.
Which makes it interesting that he never did a standards record.
Yeah. Yeah.
He never went that direction of interpretation of songs because he is the type who would do that. And could have done that. And he's put out records consistently since this era to today, I believe. He's put out a record in the last couple of years, I think. But to my knowledge, he's never done standards.
Yeah, well, he kind of also went in like a weirder direction as he...
Sure did. Yeah. You mean like where the percussion is him smashing a chair on the floor?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
something else about this song is the kind of piano melody in the beginning. And it's kind of a play on like cut up version of like the Wedding Here Comes the Bride song, which they kind of get into.
This would be my complaint, though. The Bridal March tag at the end is kind of a funny punchline.
Yeah.
I totally get why in the context of a live show you would do that. Mm-hmm. My issue is that he did it at the beginning, too, in the intro to Better Off Without a Wife.
Yeah.
It's like, we got it, man.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah. Well, and then he does like the whole thing Where it's like all you needed was da-na-na-na. You would have got away with just that.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You get it. Yeah. That's
Right,
like
exactly.
one other thing I like is a great line in this song where he says she's been married so many times she has rice marks all over her face.
That's a funny joke.
Yeah.
That is a funny joke. Yeah.
It's a funny joke. And it's a good balance of joke to song meat, if you will. I noted that too, right? It's like that's about as much joke as I want within my song.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to the next song on our focus list. This is Putnam County.
I guess things were always kind of quiet around Putnam County. Kind of shy and sleepy as they clung to the skirts of the two-lane that was stretched out just like an asphalt dance floor, where all the old-timers in bib jeans and store-bought boots were hunkering down in the dirt to lie about their lives and the places that they've been. And they'd suck on Coca-Colas and be spitting days' work.
Or as I like to call it, a prairie home companion for alcoholics.
He comes in real drunk, dude. Do we think he's had a few at this point, or is that just the act?
I think probably it's part of the act. But he also, I'm sure, was drinking. But I'm sure he's playing it up, too.
Yeah.
This is my low point. First of all, it's 7 fucking minutes long. Does not need to be 7 minutes long. But this is the one where, like, Tom Waits, the poet, is out there, and it seems like he's not paying attention to what the band is doing at all. And the band is just kind of playing, and they are so disconnected and disjointed.
I did take note that I like the piano playing here. It is really jazzy and kind of a Vince Guaraldi reharmonization kind of way, like the Vince Guaraldi Peanuts stuff. So I'm guessing that's the jazz piano player.
Yeah, and the strings, that's the bassist using a bow.
I was wondering about that because I was like, you didn't mention cello. I thought it was a cello.
Nice.
No, he's going back and forth between using a bow and plucking, and it's great.
I agree that this song is a little too long, but I actually like this song. I think it paints a good picture. I can kind of get into it visually, small town, America at night kind of vibes. That's kind of what I dug about it.
Yeah, it was sort of okay for me. I wrote, in Putnam County, every noun's a full meal and every adjective's worth 76 points in Scrabble.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty
Like,
good.
I do think he just disguises a lack of depth sometimes by just throwing vocabulary words at you.
Yeah, but he, like you said, he also does that thing where, like, this word does not fit here at all, and I'm just going to shoehorn it in
Right.
and let you decide what that means. You're like, okay.
And there is a coolness factor to that. I think this is something else we haven't touched on that's been on my mind, which is I know what the cool opinion is, the so-called cool opinion, right? This is cool music in many regards. And he's obviously a well-respected artist, and we've been saying that we respect him. But I do think this is pretty overindulgent.
Yes.
At least as a whole piece. There's some great parts you can pluck out. I will happily put it on the background again. I have this on vinyl. I've listened to it many times, but more as background listening, and I'll happily do that again. But I gotta call him on his bullshit here.
Yeah. It doesn't exactly demand closer scrutiny. Whereas I feel like some of his later albums absolutely do command closer scrutiny. And upon closer scrutiny, you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot more going on here than I remember. And like, one of my favorite songs of all time is fucking Tango Till They're Sore off of Rain Dogs. I love that song. I think it's fucking amazing. But it's also very similarly just like a bunch of weird ass imagery that doesn't mean a goddamn thing, but sounds super cool.
But he was immersing himself in the kind of scene that is being depicted in this song. Like, I don't think it's entirely performative fakeness.
I'm not saying it is. No.
Yeah.
I'm not calling out for being fake. I actually more think of it as unrefined. One of my personal favorite Tom Waits songs is off his next record, and I play it all the time on my piano. It's called The Piano Has Been Drinking. And to me, that is just a more developed and better executed version of this style of songwriting.
Yeah.
Which is to say, matching up random images and random words together that are unexpected and giving you this kind of cinematic set of images that you wouldn't normally get. To me, it's just better. He just gets better at it as he goes on.
Yeah. Well, and that also has a great punchline payoff at the end where it's like the piano has been drinking, not me. And he sounds super drunk the whole time. You're like, yeah, that's a payoff. There we go.
Right. He builds in the bad notes into the part,
Yeah.
to like indicate that he's drunk and playing the piano.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to the next song on our focus list. This is Spare Parts 1, A Nocturnal Emission.
Well, the dawn cracked hard just like a bullwhip. 'Cause I wasn't taking no lip from the night before. And they shook out the streets as the stew bums showed up like bounce checks, rubbing their necks in the sky to the color of Pepto-Bismol. Yeah, and the parking lots growled, my old sport coat full of promissory notes.
This is where the audience starts grinding my gears. I'm just like, shut up. Stop laughing. It's not that funny.
This is my favorite tune musically, though. It's upbeat. It moves.
Yeah, the band cooks. Yeah.
I kind of do agree with what you said, Marty, that I tend to like his ballads better. But listening to this album and being a little lost in it and its rambliness, I was just excited by something that picked up the energy.
Yeah, the band really cooks in this one. You can tell that they're not stretching their abilities, but they are tight and they are also experimenting while being tight. When he makes the sound of a Chevy Malibu going by with his mouth and the sax like mimics it on the sax, that's just great. You can tell the sax player was like, I get to do something. All right.
And it's a skid mark tattoo on the asphalt blue. Was that a Malibu?
It also just does that thing where it starts with a real musical idea, which is a fairly straightforward blues head kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tom Waits wrote it or the guys wrote it, but it kind of sets you into the song automatically in a way that so many of these other songs just start without announcing themselves, without giving themselves a musical identity. And it's just based on his words. I felt a difference there.
He also busts out a little scatting in this song.
I don't normally care for that part of him. But
Yes. I'm not a scatting fan in general.
No. Even though you did recommend that we cover Scat Mitch on the One Hit Wonder song battle, I recall.
Yeah.
No, that's something that's truly funny.
So this has got to be the jazz piano player doing these solos, because these are tasty licks.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Charles Mingus' song. I'm trying to remember which album. It's like the first song on one of his more better known albums. They sort of just like took a little bit of the motif that is played over that song and just were like, we'll just take it.
Could be, yeah. A lot of those things get recycled. I went through a period where I was learning a bunch of those, what they call blues heads, because they're just based over blues changes. But they all have that little riff, and it usually like repeats over the different chords in the change. And there's a ton of like classic songbook songs like that, and they are semi-interchangeable.
I'm thinking of the song Jump Monk from Mingus at the Bohemia. I'm pretty sure that's the song that I'm thinking of. Anyway, listeners, you can tell me if I'm crazy later, but that's where I think it came from.
You know what? Because we've gotten complaints about this. We're going to play a clip of it right here.
Yes.
Now you can judge Tom freely in your mind right now.
Because also, I didn't re-listen to that song this week to verify. All right, let's go on to the last song on our focus list. It is the song Nobody.
Nobody will ever love you the way I can love you. 'cause nobody's that strong. Love's bittersweet, life's treasures deep. No one can keep a love that's gone wrong.
What happens at 50 seconds? Did you guys notice that? Right at 50 seconds, there's some weird, is it an overdub? It sounds fucking fucked up.
I did not notice that. Let me play that real quick and see.
Love that's gone wrong. Nobody.
Where he goes, love has gone wrong. There's a second voice that comes in. It's like they almost like maybe it's an overdub or something.
I'm hearing that as a bass slide.
Is that what that is?
I don't hear it, man. Maybe he's doing the Tuvan throat singing thing recently.
It sounded like two. It sounds like two notes. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, did I tell you guys I was listening to a Mongolian like heavy band that does Tuvan throat singing? That's
pretty
badass.
great. Yeah.
It's called like HU. Yeah, it's awesome.
I will say that it's a little odd that we get this sort of sincere song after this like stream of consciousness rambling of an album, and then he has this song that's actually kind of a sweet song about nobody's gonna love you like I can, but then he's also basically saying nobody's gonna love you like I can because nobody's strong enough to deal with all your fucking bullshit. I was like,
yeah, it's not overly complimentary to the woman. I wanted to like this tune more than I did, but it does kind of feel more paint by number than I'd like it to be. And I am comparing Tom Waits to Tom Waits himself. In other words, he casts a tall shadow, and that's what I'm referencing. I am happy that it's an actual song. I am happy that we're getting a break from his kind of hacky Catskills comedian thing and getting some sincerity, but there's also not that much depth here.
No, I put it on here specifically because like I wanted to know if y'all think it was on purpose that he's just butchering those notes on nobody.
You know what I wrote? He said he's doing something that most resembles singing, compared to everything else.
He can sing though. He actually can sing. I perceived it more as he really leaned into his Muppet voice on this one. It feels like he's searching for his persona throughout the tune.
Yeah, but it feels like he's searching because like I feel like it's like the third time that he says the word nobody in every chorus, and the band kind of goes to this chord that you don't expect. And it sounds like he doesn't expect it. And he's like, nobody. He's never quite landed on a note. You're like, dude.
'Cause nobody's that strong. 'Cause nobody's that strong. Nobody.
Just fucking figure the note out. You had 4 tries at this. You did 4 sessions.
Come on, Tom. You toured with the Mother's Invention. You don't know what a tritone sub is?
Goddamn pussies. You know what? Maybe it was just the fact that I was so far into this album, but the fact that it was 2 minutes and 51 seconds long, I was like, I dig. There are intros longer than that on this fucking album.
It's fine. Listen, again, I think I've been pretty harsh, but the reality is there's plenty of good songs on here, and listening to the focus list was pleasant enough, right? It was just a lot to get through as an album, and so I found it hard to get through the whole damn thing. The 1 hour, 13 minutes of it was a lot. But when you strip it back to like an album side, I could pretty much listen to any album side anytime and I'd be good.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think that like vinyl is the perfect medium for listening to music. You just listen to one half of the album and then you're done. Like that's kind of...
Yeah, it's a good amount.
But does this album actually belong on a list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die? I don't know how these votes are going to go, gentlemen. So I'm going to go first to Marty.
This is a tough one for me, especially knowing that there are so many more of his albums that are on the list and one in particular that should be that isn't. I'm still going to say yes. It's just a unique style of music, and like other albums that I vote in, he's kind of the first to commercialize it, and it's not as unlistenable if you're not trying to listen to it so intently.
Sure.
But like Rob said, if you have it on in the background at a dinner party, it sets a good tone, and I appreciate that. So I'm giving it a yes.
All right. Rob, what have you got?
It's certainly not unlistenable. Far from it. I will listen to it again. But that said, if we're just talking about dinner party music that creates a vibe like this, I can list any number of other jazz vocalists, including Louis Armstrong, who I mentioned in my tweet. Like, that's not a reason for me. And to me, it's a no. I really respect Tom Waits. I respect his artistry. I respect his songwriting. I respect his dedication to staying in the game as long as he has and doing whatever the fuck he personally wants. So I do respect the album and the choices artistically, but I can't in good conscience vote this on when A, I know that his next record was sorely overlooked and I think it's just a better version of some of these ideas, and B, you're missing both his songwriting, I think, on this and his experimental acumen, which comes up maybe a little later in his career, which I think he's also rightfully lauded for. So no.
I think Rob won that argument between the two of us. If there was a debate.
Well, I am the deciding vote here. And as much as I love Tom Waits, I'm also going to vote no. And Marty, I think part of what you said is making me easily vote no, is that he's got 4 other albums on this list. And I think 5 is too many. If this was your only opportunity to hear Tom Waits, you need to hear Tom Waits at some point in your musical journey. So I would have a hard time voting it off if it wasn't for the fact that there are so many other albums on the list. And I think he is at his best when he got more weird. And this is maybe him taking a step into weird, but I like it when he gets a lot more out there. So I look forward to the other Tom Waits albums on the list, but this one for me is a no. There you have it. Tom, I am sorry. I hope you never hear this because you seem like a very cool guy. But this one, not on the list. Better luck next 4 times. All right, just a few things to do before we wrap up our episode. Rob, how's it going? Are there any scrawlings on a bar napkin that you would like to read to us?
Indeed there are. Indeed there are. Let me reach my hand in. We got one here. Stan from Portland writes,
Oh, no shit.
Hey, whingers and gripers. I loved the episode about 69 love songs. I'm very glad listener Sula nominated this album for deeper examination. The panel's experience as listeners is pretty similar to mine, and I agree. The best of this album is absolutely great American songbook material. I wanted to tell you a little story, though. In the years after 69 Love Songs' release, I worked as a freelance journalist, and when the documentary about the magnetic field's strange powers was about to open in my hometown of Portland, Oregon, I received an offer from the local newspaper to interview Stephen Merritt about it. A cool opportunity for sure, but one that came with no small amount of trepidation given Merritt's slippery, cranky reputation in interviews and the fact that the publicist said all questions had to be related to the documentary itself, not general magnetic fields queries. At least my fear of an adverse reaction from the man himself helped me focus on coming up with quality questions. This listener linked his interview, which I read, the print interview, and then he goes on to say, it reads pretty much like a reasonably okay interview with an artist, but what it doesn't capture is the mega cringe experience I had doing the interview itself over the phone. When you read the questions and then Stephen Merritt answers, what does not come through is that after every single question I asked, I was met with an unsettling stone cold silence of 10 to 20 seconds.
Oh, God. Brutal.
Then and only then would Merritt answer with a perfectly composed, pithy statement delivered in a flat monotone with no ums or ahs or anything like that. It was surreal.
He sounds like a fun guy. I'd love to hang out with him.
Love the show. Keep going. We'll all get old together. What a nice sentiment. Maybe you'll run into Marty over there on Alberta Street one of these days.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have one more here. This is Julio writing from Mexico. He writes, Dear complainers, I heard of you when one of you went on the Only Three Lads podcast. That was me, Rob, Julio, and decided to give your podcast a go. And here I am a couple years later, having listened to all of your episodes. It took a while to get used to the way you do things. That's what our wives said, too.
Oh, damn.
All the nerdiness can be a little overwhelming. No kidding.
That's also what our wives said, yeah.
Once you get accustomed to it, you quite enjoy all those little tidbits. As for Robert Dimery's choice of albums, while it's fairly comprehensive, the list, in terms of styles, the fact that most of his selections come from English-speaking countries does alienate some awesome music from other countries that I think do deserve to be on the list. And Julio has 3 quick recommendations that I'm pretty sure are all Spanish language recommendations, so I wanted to give them to you listeners as well. He's got Dynamo by Soda Stereo, El Silencio by Caifanes, probably mispronounced that, and Pies Descalzos by Shakira. Closes by saying, thanks for giving such great content and keep up the good work. And you guys keep up the good work of sending letters our way. We love to hear what's on your mind, whether we got it right, whether we got it wrong, or recommendations of great albums that we may not have heard, especially if you're from a non-English speaking country. We've been compiling those. We have an Italian playlist that an Italian listener sent over, at least one. We have a couple Belgian playlists that a Belgian listener sent over, and now we have some great Spanish language records to listen to. So keep them coming. 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. And thank you to everyone who is listening while we get our homework assignment for next week. I have the Albinator here. It has been face down on the bar in the corner, drinking and rambling and making absolutely no goddamn sense. Let's see if I can get it up and get it to spit out another album. So without any further ado, drum roll please, we will be listening to... The album is Regatta de Blanc, and the band is The Police.
No.
There we go.
Nice.
Looking forward to that.
I believe we did cover the Police like in the first 20 episodes, and you guys somehow, without me, I might add, voted Synchronicity off the list.
Jesus.
We did. We're still calibrating the machine at that point, Rob.
So maybe it's time to right some wrongs, but I guess we'll see.
Sacred scrolls are sacred for a reason, Rob, you know.
Indeed, indeed.
So that should be exciting. Listen to Regatta de Blanc for next week. Thank you to everyone for listening. From 1001 Album Complaints, I have been Tom.
I've been Marty.
And I'm Rob.
Come on down to the bush.